pollution in China is a problem that has a range of socio-political causes and consequences. This video will be exploring the South China Sea as a case study. The South China Sea is a hotspot for geopolitical dispute in Southeast Asia. The causes, consequences, and responses to marine pollution caused by activity in the South China Sea have transnational impacts. These also bring up questions of environmental justice as vulnerable communities face threats to their livelihoods and as governments struggle to cooperate. The South China Sea is a subject of controversy, mainly between the countries of China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei.
It's an extremely important body of water, and right now 5 countries lay claim to some part of it. Now, most countries base their claim off the UN Law of the Seas, which says a country's territorial waters extend 200 miles off their shore, an area called the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. Countries have exclusive rights to all the resources and trade in their EEZ. It's their sovereign territory. But any area that isn't in an EEZ is regarded as international waters, and it falls under UN maritime law, which means everybody shares it. Now, every country in the South China Sea region uses this 200-mile EEZ threshold to determine its claims.
These 6 nations claim sovereignty over the South China Sea, but China claims over 80% of the territory.
China argues they have a historical claim to the South China Sea, dating back to naval expeditions in the 15th century. And they mark it using a really confusing border called the 9-dash line.
As you can see, the sea is one of the most important locations for transnational trade and is very important for economic growth in China. According to the South China Morning Post, almost 1/3 of the global trade shipping passes through the sea, including imports of oil into China. The South China Sea is also one of the most resource-rich and important ecosystems in the region, thus its controversial status. It boasts 10% of the world's fisheries, thus supporting the livelihoods of millions of people in the region. According to the Post, it also holds 11 billion barrels of oil, which makes it an economically viable location. The sea is rich in biodiversity. It holds 600 species of coral reefs, 3,000 species of fish, and 1,500 species of sponge. The context of the South China Sea is important in understanding why competing countries hold the sea in such high importance and why many conflicts emerge.
Now that we understand the context of the South China Sea and its conflicting claims, we can explore the causes and consequences of pollution in the region. Broadly, sources of marine pollution in China vary from ecological changes, such as climate change, to human activities on land or waters. Overpopulation contributes to the problem of accumulation of trash that eventually runs off through the streams and into the sea, affecting the residents living near the coast. Similar to inland waste pollutants from agriculture, inorganic nitrogen and phosphate lead to the eutrophication of the coastal waters. Eutrophication is characterized by excessive nutrients in the sea and causes the growth of algae and planktons that compete with marine animals and corals. As for the South China Sea, the construction of artificial islands also contributes to the degradation of the quality of marine life, along with land-based garbage making its way to the ocean. There are also indirect forces in society, including a lack of understanding of marine life and constant focus on economic growth, which puts pressure on the environment to supply economic needs. Human activities that stem from economic pressures, such as overfishing, offshore oil and gas exploitation, also lead to the quicker degradation of marine life. There are concerns about seafood supply due to climate change and resource exploitation as human activities persist. Changes in commerce involving building artificial islands in the sea cause oil and chemical leaks and sediments runoff, especially in the case of the South China Sea.
There are far-reaching consequences to marine pollution in China. The following video from CNN News explains how coral reefs are degrading as a result of the South China Sea's contentious state.
We started to see that other parts of that region in the South China Sea are not doing so well.
And how much loss of reef cover did you discover?
Well, using the combination of diving and satellite data, we assessed pretty much all of the atolls that are found in the South China Sea, the atolls that are currently occupied by one nation or another. And we found up to a 70% decrease in coral reef ecosystem presence in some of these atolls that have been massively converted into military bases.
Aside from the destruction of coral reefs and the subsequent loss of biodiversity, overfishing in the South China Sea is also a consequence with strong social and environmental implications in the region. In 2015, the World Wildlife Fund found that 20 to 50% of fish revenues have been lost in the South China Sea. The study showed that if no action is taken, by 2045, fish common in the sea will decline from 9 to 59% due to overfishing, acidification of the water, and carbon dioxide emissions. Furthermore, maritime disputes have led to the militarization of the sea and continued construction of artificial islands to increase territorial claims. In 1997, the Philippine Navy and Chinese fishermen sent orders to leave Scarborough Shoal, but Philippine fishermen fought back and removed Chinese markers and claimed their own territory. As a response, China sent 3 warships to survey the Philippine-occupied islands. These contentious acts have led to a rapid decrease in the fish population. Many of these threats are man-made and aggravate already existing natural ones. Government inaction could worsen this already bad situation in the South China Sea.
The Chinese government has had limited response to the environmental degradation in the South China Sea because it has benefited so far from economic growth. As a result, the geopolitical situation and economic incentive have taken priority over addressing environmental damage. Despite government inaction, in recent years, China has been engaged in agreements in the region. In November 2018, the Philippines and China came to a bilateral agreement in which both sides agreed to curb their activities in the sea. Further, both sides expressed a commitment to international law and a commitment to continuing scientific research in order to find peaceful ways to resolve disputes and ensure stability in the region. In terms of NGO work in the region, it is definitely limited, and this might be a reflection of official government policies in China. However, one of the most active NGOs in China is called China Blue, which was founded in 2015 in order to address issues of marine pollution, marine degradation, and unsustainable practices of fishing. Their current projects include a seafood sustainability base, aquaculture sustainability projects, and a fishery improvement project. Interestingly, much of civil society opposition in recent years has come from citizens of nations other than China, which brings up the question of who uses power and privilege into play.
The Philippines is not for sale. Hindi mo dapat ginagawang collateral ang ating mga lupain, ang ating mga natural resources, kapalit ng pautang.
Filipino citizens have protested Chinese environmental impacts in the region. In March of 2019, former Filipino Secretary Albert Del Rosario and former Ombudsman, or public advocate, Conchita Caprio Morales, acting as private citizens, called for the International Criminal Court to examine China's practices in the South China Sea. As people with access to systems of power, they want to see if the Chinese are responsible for crimes against humanity under the Rome Statute. Per their logic, China has denied 320,000 Filipinos access to their fishing grounds. This denial has come in the form of environmental damage, which the pair argue has resulted in the diminishing of fish stocks as well as the destruction of important environmental facets, like coral reefs. Over 25,000 Filipinos signed the petition.
Demand accountability from those who destroy marine areas, and that we want to check impunity as a deterrent for other countries to commit these crimes.
In disputes over the South China Sea, there have been issues of environmental justice where power and privilege play huge parts, especially in China's claim of the sea. Marine pollution affecting the neighboring countries and the livelihood of people sustained by fisheries is just one of the many pieces of evidence of a local issue influencing the other citizens on a global scale.